The morning air in Texas carried the scent of dust and promise, but that day it smelled of gunpowder and betrayal. Harrison McAllister dismounted his horse with the arrogance of a king inspecting a land he already considered his own. His men, a dozen mercenaries with vacant eyes and cocked rifles, formed a menacing semicircle before the modest wooden house. The flag of the Republic of Texas, with its single star, fluttered on the porch, a solitary, stubborn act of defiance. On the front step, standing with a dignity McAllister would never understand, was Elias Mercer. He held no weapon. His hands, calloused by the plow and the reins, hung at his sides, but his eyes burned with the fire of one who had already seen war. "Mercer!" McAllister's voice was oily, masked by a false layer of civility. "We've come to settle our little land dispute. This document, sealed in Mexico City, invalidates any title deed granted by the old rebellion. This land belongs to the Rio Grande Development Company, and I am the company." Elias didn't look at the paper the man extended. His eyes were fixed on the flag. "This patch of ground wasn't bought with gold, McAllister. It was paid for with the blood of better men than you, men who believed in Sam Houston's word and the dream of a free land." McAllister let out a short, contemptuous laugh. "Dreams don't plow fields, Mercer. Progress demands sacrifice. Sign the transfer papers and you'll receive fair compensation. Refuse, and my men will remove you. The choice is yours." Injustice was an open wound. Elias remembered, as if it were yesterday, the day he received that land title. A young soldier, returning from the Battle of San Jacinto, his body aching, but his soul ablaze. General Houston himself had clasped his hand, his gaze tired but firm. "Build a family here, son. Make this soil worthwhile," he'd said. And Elias did. He and his wife Sarah Harper had turned that patch of wilderness into a home. Every plank in that house, every furrow in the field, was a prayer of gratitude. He had seen the signs, of course. In recent months, McAllister had arrived in the region like a vulture, using legal loopholes and intimidation to seize settlers' lands. Elias had confronted him in town weeks before, trying to warn his neighbors. "He speaks of progress, but his eyes only see profit," Elias had said. But fear was a potent poison, and many preferred to bow their heads, hoping the storm would pass them by. He had clung to faith, to loyalty, believing the law and honor of Texas would protect him. Now he saw how naive he'd been. The law was whatever men like McAllister said it was. "There is nothing to choose from," Elias said, his voice low but resonating with the weight of a promise. "My answer is in that flag. It represents an oath, and I do not break oaths." McAllister's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. He nodded to his men who raised their rifles. The tension was so thick, the air seemed difficult to breathe. Sarah Harper watched from the window, her face pale, but her eyes firm. She clutched an old Bible, not out of fear, but as a reminder of the strength that had sustained them for so long. Elias knew what he was risking. It wasn't just the land. It was his family's future, his wife's safety, the memory of his comrades. But to yield would be to betray all of it. It would be to let their sacrifice die in vain. McAllister, sensing his men's hesitation in Elias's defiant calm, opted for a final humiliation. "Your loyalty is to a dyed rag, Mercer, a fantasy that's over. You have until sunrise tomorrow to gather your belongings and disappear. If you're still here when the sun touches that ridge, this house and everything in it will turn to ash. And that flag of yours, it'll be the first to burn." He mounted his horse, casting one last look of contempt at Elias. The group rode off, kicking up a cloud of dust that slowly settled, leaving a heavy, oppressive silence. Elias remained, motionless for a long time, his gaze lost on the horizon. He felt broken, defeated by greed and power he didn't understand. The faith that had sustained him now seemed a cruel joke. But then, as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in hues of orange and blood, the hot desert wind brought something else, a distant, almost imperceptible sound, the steady, firm trot of a single horse coming from the east. Elias didn't know who it was, but he felt something shift within him. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something older, deeper. It was the certainty that in Texas, no injustice goes unanswered for long. If you think an ordinary man cannot stand against power alone, wait and see what happens when the honor of an entire nation is wounded. Night fell over the Mercer ranch like a shroud. Elias did not sleep. He sat on the porch, his hunting rifle across his lap, not to fight a dozen men, but as a symbolic act of vigil. Every creak of the wood, every coyote howl sounded like a prelude to destruction. McAllister's injustice wasn't just about taking land, it was an attack on the soul. He wanted to erase history, to replace the courage of the pioneers with the cold logic of profit. The next day, in the small town of Brazoria, McAllister continued his campaign. He bought drinks for everyone in the saloon, loudly proclaiming the bright future he was bringing, a future of railroads and cattle, where loyalty would be rewarded with gold coins, not useless memories of past battles. He painted Elias Mercer as an obstacle, a stubborn man living in the past, a fool clinging to a piece of cloth instead of embracing prosperity. Texas needs men of vision, not dreamers, McAllister boomed, slamming his whiskey glass on the table. His armed men, strategically positioned, ensured no one disagreed. The antagonist's arrogance was suffocating. He moved through the town as if he already owned it, dispensing veiled threats disguised as friendly advice. He visited the blacksmith, suggesting he might lose the contract with the new company if he continued to shoe the horses of rebels like Mercer. He spoke to the general store owner, reminding him how his shelves might mysteriously become empty if deliveries from the capital stopped arriving. Fear spread like a silent plague. Elias felt it when he went into town for supplies. Old friends averted their eyes. Neighbors who once shared bread now crossed the street to avoid him. He was being turned into a pariah in his own land. Public dishonor was a weapon as cruel as any rifle. Sarah Harper faced the hostility with quiet strength. The other women in town, once her friends, now ignored her at the well, but Sarah did not bend. Her eyes said what her mouth didn't need to. Our honor is not for sale. That night, loneliness weighed heavily on Elias. He walked to the small grove behind his house, where his parents' headstone stood. He knelt, touching the cold stone. It was then that a memory, long buried, surfaced with overwhelming clarity. He was a boy, no more than 19, lying in the mud of a forgotten battlefield. A musket ball had hit him in the leg. His company had retreated, and he'd been left behind, expecting death. Darkness was descending when a figure crouched beside him. The man was large, his face etched by time and sun, and he wore a coonskin cap that seemed as natural on him as bark on a tree. He tore a piece of his own shirt to staunch the bleeding and gave him water from his canteen. "What's your name, son?" The man's voice was deep, with a Tennessee drawl. "Elias Mercer, sir." The man smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "No sirs here, just Texans. Get up, Elias Mercer. This land will need men like you to stand up for it." It was Davy Crockett, the hero of the Alamo, whom everyone thought had died. But rumors persisted. Some said he'd escaped, others that he'd never been there, that he was fighting a war in the shadows. To Elias, it didn't matter. On that day, Crockett wasn't a legend. He was a man who had saved him. He had instilled in Elias a fundamental truth. Texas wasn't a piece of land. It was a promise that an ordinary man with faith and courage could build something lasting. That was his deepest motivation. He wasn't fighting for a deed. He was fighting to honor the hand that lifted him from the mud, to keep alive the promise Crockett represented. He returned to the house, his heart heavy but his soul ablaze. He saw two of McAllister's men on horses standing on the nearby hill, a sinister silhouette against the moon. They did nothing, just watched. It was psychological torture, a constant reminder of his power. But Elias felt no fear. He felt a cold, calculating fury begin to take shape. McAllister thought he was breaking the spirit of a lone rancher. He didn't know that by stepping onto that ranch and threatening that flag, he had just awakened the wrong man. The lone rider who had arrived the previous night was no stranger. It was Davy Crockett, older, his face a map of wrinkles and experiences, but his eyes still held the same spark of sharp intelligence and unwavering determination. He hadn't come by chance. Traveling anonymously through Texas, he'd heard the stories about Harrison McAllister, a new kind of tyrant who used contracts instead of cannons. He found Elias in the barn before dawn, the meeting silent, a nod of mutual recognition. Crockett was no longer the boisterous congressman or soldier. He was a strategist, a ghost who knew the soul of the land and the men who inhabited it. Fighting with guns will only make you a martyr and him a victim, Crockett said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Men like McAllister don't fear death. They fear humiliation. They build their power on a foundation of fear and manufactured respect. We won't destroy the man. We will destroy the foundation. The plan began to take shape in the silence of the barn, amidst the smell of gunpowder and, hey, it wouldn't be a battle of shots, but of wits. McAllister's strength was his public image and the fear he inspired. That's where they would attack. And for that, they needed a key ally. Someone who could move through the community's shadows without raising suspicion. That ally was Sarah Harper. Crockett spoke with her in the kitchen while breakfast was prepared. He saw in her not a frightened wife, but a rock of resilience. Her family had been in Texas for generations. She knew every family, every secret, every debt, and every loyalty in the town of Brazoria. McAllister bought the men with money and promises, Crockett said, but he cannot buy the women. They see the truth behind the arrogance. They hear what is said when husbands return from the saloon, drunk and full of bravado or fear. You, Mrs. Harper, are our silent army. Sarah began to act. She went to the general store, not as the wife of a pariah, but as a woman concerned for the community. She spoke to the other wives, not about McAllister directly, but about the scarcity of flour, about rising prices, about the uncertainty. She planted seeds of doubt, making them question if McAllister's prosperity was for everyone or just for him. She listened to whispers, noted which of McAllister's men complained about late payment, which drank too much, and spoke out of turn. Meanwhile, Elias, following Crockett's instructions, began to play McAllister's game, but with his own rules. He sent an anonymous message, forging the handwriting of an informant, saying a shipment of Mexican government gold was passing through a northern route. McAllister, greedy and paranoid, took the bait. He sent half his men on a futile 2-day chase, leaving him with less protection and making him look like a fool when they returned empty-handed. These small victories were like sips of water for a thirsty man. They didn't solve the main problem, but they restored a little hope and showed that the giant had feet of clay. Elias's confidence grew. He was no longer just a victim. He was a fighter. Tension in the region mounted. McAllister, feeling he was losing control of the narrative, decided to deliver a final blow to crush any resistance. He announced a loyalty ceremony in the town square. All landowners would be required to attend and sign a new property registry, a document that, in effect, made them vassals of his company. And to symbolize the new era, the old Texas flag that flew on the town square's flagpole would be permanently lowered. The news reached the Mercer Ranch like an ultimatum. It was the final confrontation. That night, Elias met Crockett on a hilltop overlooking the town lights. "He'll crush us, Davy. He'll force everyone to bow." Crockett kept his eyes on the town. A slight smile touched his lips. "A tyrant always makes the same mistake, Elias. He believes power comes from the stage he builds. He summons the crowd to witness his glory, not realizing he also summons them to witness his downfall. Let him build his own gallows. We just need to be there to pull the lever." As the town prepared for the ceremony day, no one noticed Crockett's quiet figure in the back of the blacksmith shop, methodically cleaning and oiling his old trusted rifle. He wasn't doing it for the battle McAllister expected, but for the justice Texas deserved. The powerful laughed, thinking Elias Mercer had surrendered, that the resistance had been broken. Little did they know, the silence was just the sound before the shot. Brazoria's town square was filled with a silent, tense crowd. It was a silence of fear, not respect. Harrison McAllister climbed onto a wooden platform built for the occasion, his remaining guards forming a human barrier. The midday sun beat down, making the men sweat under their hats. McAllister, radiant in his expensive suit, raised his hands as if he were a savior. He spoke of a future of order, progress, and wealth, a future under his benevolent leadership. His words were hollow, and everyone knew it. He was there to demand submission, not to offer partnership. Elias Mercer and Sarah Harper stood in the middle of the crowd, looking like just two more defeated settlers. No one paid them any attention. They were the past, and McAllister was the future. For the grand finale of his speech, McAllister made a signal. Two of his men climbed the flagpole and lowered the flag of the Republic of Texas. The Lone Star descended slowly, looking tired and faded under the relentless sun. McAllister took the flag and held it up for all to see. "This symbol," he yelled, his voice full of contempt, "this symbol of a failed rebellion, of poverty, of chaos, it does not represent the future. It represents the dust from which we are emerging." He spat on the fabric. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. It was sacrilege. Men who had fought under that flag clenched their fists, but fear held them in place. Then McAllister pulled a hunting knife from his boot. With a theatrical, violent motion, he ripped the flag from top to bottom. The sound of the fabric tearing was like a scream, echoing in the shocked silence of the square. He held up the two torn halves, a triumphant smile on his face, expecting the applause of his men and the resigned silence of the people. It was at that exact moment that a calm voice, yet with the authority of a force of nature, cut through the air. "You know, that flag cost the lives of many good men. It's mighty rude to tear up someone else's property." All eyes turned. Emerging from the deep shadow between the general store and the sheriff's office walked Davy Crockett. He wasn't running, wasn't shouting. He was simply walking, his old rifle resting casually on his shoulder. He wore no uniform, just the worn clothes of a traveler, but his presence was a thunderclap. The name spread through the crowd in shocked whispers. "Crockett! It's Davy Crockett!" McAllister's face turned ashen. Panic flashed in his eyes. "Get him! He's a traitor, a ghost from the past!" He roared at his guards, but the guards hesitated. Drawing a weapon on frightened settlers was one thing, pointing it at the living legend who embodied the very spirit of Texas was quite another. It was then that Sarah Harper's silent army went into action. The wives of the guards, scattered in the crowd, stepped forward. One of them grabbed her husband's arm. "John, are you really going to shoot Davy Crockett over a man who can't even pay your wages on time?" she whispered, loud enough for others to hear. Doubt spread among the men like wildfire in dry grass. Their loyalty, bought with coins, dissolved in the face of loyalty, born of blood and honor. Crockett stopped a few yards from the platform. He didn't even look at the guards. His eyes were fixed on McAllister. He didn't raise his rifle. Instead, he pulled a bundle of papers from his inner coat pocket. "You talk a lot about documents and legality, McAllister. Perhaps you'll like these." He tossed the papers onto the platform steps. "These are copies of your letters to General Santa Anna, offering to pacify this region in exchange for exclusive mining rights. There's also a sworn statement from your foreman, detailing how you forged land deeds and intimidated families to steal their land. He wasn't too happy when he found out you planned to replace him." The truth crashed down on the square with the weight of an anvil. McAllister's foundation, built on lies and fear, crumbled in an instant. He wasn't a businessman. He was a traitor of the worst kind, selling the land they had bled for. The crowd, previously paralyzed by fear, now seethed with righteous anger. It wasn't a lynching mob. It was a people awakening. Elias Mercer walked slowly to the platform. He ignored McAllister, who was now trembling, stammering denials. Elias knelt and picked up the two torn pieces of the flag. He held them with reverence, his gaze fixed on them, his face a mask of pain and victory. The sheriff, a man who had served McAllister until then, looked at the crowd, at Crockett, and at his own conscience. He walked up to McAllister, pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt, and snapped them around the man's wrists. When the people saw the colonel cuffed, no one cheered. They simply removed their hats, in respect for the man who brought justice without shedding hate. Weeks later, peace had returned to the valley. It was a different peace, stronger, forged in adversity. Elias Mercer's ranch flourished. His neighbors, freed from McAllister's yoke, came in a collective effort to help him repair the broken gate and reinforce the fence. A silent, sincere apology. Elias held no grudges. He understood the power of fear, but now they shared the even greater power of courage. He had become, unintentionally, a pillar of the community, a man whose quiet integrity spoke louder than any speech. Harrison McAllister was not hanged in the square. The Texas that Crockett and Mercer defended was a place of laws, not blind vengeance. He was tried by a court in Austin. The evidence was irrefutable. He was convicted of treason and fraud, stripped of all his illicit possessions, and sentenced to a life of hard labor in the salt mines. His punishment was not death, but oblivion. He, who wanted his name etched in the annals of progress, became an anonymous footnote in the history of greed. One afternoon before he departed, Davy Crockett sat on Elias's porch. Between them, on a small table, lay the flag. Sarah Harper, with infinite patience, had stitched the two pieces together. The scar on the fabric was visible, an uneven line crossing the lone star. Elias looked at the stitching with a trace of sadness. "It'll never be the same," he said. Crockett picked up the flag, feeling the rough fabric in his hands. "No, it won't. and that's a good thing. He looked at Elias, his eyes as deep as the Texas sky. A scar isn't a sign of weakness, son. It's a sign that something was wounded but survived. It's proof that the wound healed and became stronger. A land without scars is a land that has never fought for anything. This flag, with this stitching, tells a better story than a brand new flag. In that moment, Elias Mercer understood the deepest lesson. Freedom isn't a gift given once. It is a constant vigil, a daily struggle against greed and tyranny, great or small. The strength of Texas wasn't in its legendary heroes, but in the resilience of its common people, in the courage of a woman like Sarah, in the integrity of a rancher like himself. The justice they had achieved wasn't just for them. It rekindled the spirit of the entire region, reminding everyone that freedom comes at a high price, but those who fight with faith and honor are never forgotten. At sunset, Crockett mounted his horse. He didn't say goodbye. He simply nodded to Elias, a gesture of respect between equals. Elias and Sarah stood on the porch, watching the solitary figure disappear over the horizon. Elias held the mended flag. The wind made it flutter, and the lone star, scarred but whole, seemed to shine with a new light. He tried to destroy that man, but ended up destroying himself. In Texas, true revenge is living free when the enemy lives bound to his own past. If you were moved by this story of honor and justice, and believe that the values of courage and freedom should never be forgotten, subscribe to our channel. Share this video with everyone who is proud of their roots and believes in the strength of the people. And don't forget to comment from what city and state you're watching. We want to know how far the spirit of Texas reaches.